we are. I always like to make sure. Oh, no. There we go. All right, you guys ready?
Ready.
Welcome everyone to Flyover Footy. We are a St. Louis soccer podcast, and we are broadcasting right now on the big 550 KTRS. Welcome everyone. It is, if you're listening to the live show, it is home opener day for the Cardinals. I think we all tried our best to watch as much of the game today as we could. I'm wearing my Cardinals shirt, but we have other announcements, things like T-Rav Boys announcements that we're going to get to later. There's a lot going on, but I want to start the show with something I have been neglecting to talk about. Stuart's on the show, and he's the newest dad to the podcast. Stuart, congratulations, man. It's awesome.
Woo.
Thanks. Yeah, no, I mean, you guys are both dads, everything changes immediately. So yeah, the last couple of weeks have been crazy, just adjusting, and Sarah's been fantastic. So doing what I can to support her because she's the star of the show, making sure baby girl's surviving. So
Absolutely.
You're already ahead of the curve to most because you realize that.
Yeah, right.
That's the key.
How worthless we are for a while. But yeah, that other voice you just heard is Matt Baker. Matt, how are you doing today, man?
Doing fantastic. Like you said, we're broadcasting this right now, recording on Cardinals home opener day. We have some exciting city things as usual at this point going on. So life is good, life is busy, and it just seems like a lot of good stuff's happening right now.
It is. And, at the top of the list for me personally, I'm pretty biased here, is that St. Louis City is 5-0. That's pretty incredible. 5 wins, no losses, no draws. What a start to the season. I think we're going to start the show by going over our previous win, our most recent win against Real Salt Lake. Matt, do you want to lead us off with the starting 11?
Yeah, so this is our 5th game, and up until this match last week against RSL, we had kind of drove out a 4-4-2 formation on our home matches. For our away matches, we'd stuck to more of a 4-2-3-1, riding out Klaus as our lone striker. But for this match, coming off of Nico Gioacchini's first goal, we kind of went back to the 4-4-2 on the road, and a little bit out of necessity from some of the internationals that were gone, injuries that we had. But our lineup last week had some familiar faces, had some new ones. So it looks like Berkey and net, backline of Nelson, Parker, Bartlett, Nerwinski, Leuven, Vasilev in the midfield, Ostrak and Stroud out wide on the wings, and Klaus and Gioacchini up top. So I thought this was out of necessity in the sense that Jabulo Blom was out again. He had COVID, still recovering. He was on the bench. He did see minutes, but he wasn't able to be in the starting lineup. And we're going to touch on him and his availability for Minnesota coming up. But the other interesting thing is Kyle Hebert was unavailable. Kyle Hebert, that last minute almost injury call up to Canada, was unavailable for the first time all season. So Lucas Bartlett got the nod, and actually his second start, the one before obviously for Tim Parker. And as we're going to look at, some good things happen apparently when Lucas Bartlett starts. That 4-4-2 really did some work, and Nico Gioacchini in particular had himself a game.
He did indeed. Stuart, any thoughts on the lineup before we get started on some of the highlights?
Well, there were some questions. We weren't entirely sure if Parker was going to start leading up to the week, but just him and Bartlett and Parker and anyone are an awesome pairing. And one of those great signs of being a good center back is making your partner look great. And I know Bartlett's great on his own. Hebert's great on his own. He wouldn't get a call up to Canada otherwise. But Parker just elevates those guys. And that was just great to see against Salt Lake, seeing him back. And long may he stay healthy.
Yeah, probably pushing through some pain in that regard, but it seemed like there was absolutely no question about it. That, I think they asked if he was okay, and I think he was just like no brainer. He was going to be there that day. So it was really nice that he was there, and I agree with you guys. I think he made a big difference by being there. I love what you said, Stu, there. He makes his partners better. I completely agree. Let's talk about the first half of the game. Matt here in the notes talking about how good RSL was against us, or how weak St. Louis City was. I don't know. How did you take it personally?
I honestly took it as RSL was the best team so far to game plan for St. Louis City. They had a bye week the week before, so they had 2 weeks to game plan for this club. And we've seen, as we've talked about, a little bit of a different opposition each match. The opposing teams have thrown a little bit of a different look towards us. The game flow has gone a little bit differently to where we've either been behind immediately. We were behind at some point in the first half, but we went ahead and we stayed ahead. We went ahead and we got knocked back. This time it was more of that stalemate, more or less, in the first half. And we were on the heels. We were on our heels of that stalemate to the point where, and Bradley Carnell called it in the post game, we were just kind of trying to outlast, trying to withstand the pressure that they were sending. We were trying to kind of weather the storm, so to speak. And as opposed to getting the ball into the final third, creating a lot of chances, they did a good job, RSL, of preventing some of those long passes, preventing some of those vertical buildups that St. Louis has been known for in the first 4 matches. So without that, and with kind of the way that our formation was looking with a 4-4-2, Gioacchini and Klaus weren't able to get some space. They weren't able to be unlocked up front, and Vasilev and Leuven in the middle weren't able to drive the ball as a pivot. We weren't able to get some successive runs out on the wings. Just nothing was happening. We didn't have more than a few shots on goal. We didn't have more than a few shots. We only had 1 shot, I think, on goal in that first half. RSL, on the other hand, brought it to Berkey a few times, and none more so than at the end of the first half. And that kind of, from a first half perspective, it is almost the first 44, 45 minutes, and then there's the stoppage time save that Berkey had. Because once you were successful in outlasting, withstanding that storm from RSL, what Berkey did to save that shot, full extension, kind of leg diving to his weak side to end the first half, tells the story of, that was the exclamation mark to me of withstanding the pressure that RSL was giving and putting us on our heels. That was clearly the turning point. And that's where the narrative nationally and locally kind of went, is that was obviously the turning point, especially what was about to happen in the second half.
Yeah, and just a couple bookmarks that we can talk about later or in the wind down portion of the show here. But some things that you said at the beginning there, that RSL was on top of us. They definitely had 2 weeks to game plan against us. And I thought the first half showed that especially. We were worried about a lot of switches early, and Carnell mentioned that there were a lot of switches and passes across the field that they were using, making our guys run a lot more. And they were just up for the battle. That's like you said, Matt, I think they were the team that has done the best against us, even though it was mostly in the first half. Stuart, any thoughts before we kind of go into these goals, kind of burn through these goals?
Yeah, I was really impressed with Julio up top. He gave us fits, I think, especially in the second half of the first half. He was consistently getting around our center backs. There was one where, Bartlett had no contact, but there was a challenge he had on Julio and kind of swept the ball away. But he was a really tricky attacking player who really should have come across with a goal, I think, at some point in that game, but we held him. But he was very impressive. I thought Justin Merrim had a good game for Real Salt Lake too. I know he got subbed out fairly early in the second half, but overall, I was impressed. I thought we did well. I mean, you talk about the save by Berkey at the end of the first half was amazing, but if Bartlett nails and sinks that header off the corner at the 9th minute in the first half, then that changes the entire momentum of the game as well. And he's kicking himself. You could see as soon as he
visibly upset.
Yeah, he put that right into McMath's hands, and he was slapping his gloved hands together in the cold, running away from there. But Bartlett's going to nail some of those headers. If you're getting free on those corners, Leuven's going to find you. So we'll see some of those goals.
Absolutely, getting free on corners. That's what we're about to talk about. One thing I want to put a pin in, since we're talking about Bartlett as well, is later I hope we can talk about that slide tackle early in the game. RSL was putting so much pressure on, and that slide tackle was either a missed pen or the best tackle I've seen all season. So we can talk about that later. But speaking of Leuven finding people, in this case it wasn't Leuven, but our first goal for St. Louis is in the 47th minute. And it was an Indy Vasilev take in the corner. This is becoming a theme, right? It's set piece goals are definitely a way we've been getting our goals early in the season. Matt, do you want to talk about this one?
Oh yeah, I was so thrilled that Indy Vassilev was the one that was able to kind of get this going. We know and we saw the power of Leuven before. He was the one who assisted the first goal. He's had kind of been the presumptive set piece taker leader on our squad, but Indiana Vassilev with his left foot is just as dangerous. And this in particular, able to come out of the first half and really owning up to the tide changing. Vassilev put a ball in the right over Klaus's head. I mean, it looked like Klaus knew exactly what he was doing when he ducked out of the way, so it can land at Joe Aquini's foot and he can put it home. And that clearly changed the entire momentum. So Vassilev showing the danger that we have on both sides of the field from our corners, and also giving us that additional confirmed flexibility almost that it doesn't matter who's on the field, Leuven, Vassilev, at any point, either can and are dangerous.
Yeah, in the next goal, let's go straight to that one, Matt, if you can talk about this one. I had forgotten that Isak Jensen was the one that led this one in right after he subbed on. That's a really cool detail.
Yeah, so I made note of that because in the post-game presser, Carnell was very specific to say after kind of weathering that storm and outlasting, he knew they had triggers in the second half that they were waiting to bring on, and that those players had to be more brave. Those triggers that he mentioned being Rasmus Alm and Isak Jensen. And so it was very noteworthy to me that the minute Isak Jensen came on, the play after he subbed in, he took the ball himself, got up past midfield, laid it off for Nelson to the left, a sequence that we had been sorely missing in the first half, but has become a hallmark of St. Louis City, is for our midfielder to kind of pivot the ball up and play it off for a fullback who's able to cross it in the box and then find somebody who's in there. In this case, it was a cross just outside the box, and it led to what ended up being the goal of the week by Klaus.
Yeah, crazy. I thought I was kind of surprised at that. Stuart, any thoughts on that goal or the one that we talked about already with the corner?
I mean, so I was heading over to second shift. I had agreed I would watch the first half at home before going to the second shift for the second half. So I didn't see Nico's goal on first while it was live, but catching it later. No, it's just we are so deadly on set pieces. You cannot turn off for a second on this team. I mean, I'm sure RSL going into half and coming out of half, they were feeling like they had the momentum. They were excited. And then the 48th minute or early 54th minute? What was that? But just punished them right away. And at that point on, it was just over. I mean, the game was decided. It wasn't going to end any other way than a rout.
Yeah. The funny thing on this, real quick, one other note on the set piece goal is looking at the stats from a set piece perspective, whether it's in the field or a corner, we are tied for the league lead in set piece goals with Atlanta United at 3.
So crazy. And is that sustainable? That's going to be a fun conversation to have. So far, every underlying stat seems to think that we can keep this going, back passes or not. That's going to be a fun theme.
We're tops in the league in overall set piece goals, and we're top 6 in set piece shots. So it's one of those almost score by attrition, so that you get yourself in the position to take as many of these shots with the quality of player that we have to take and to finish, and we're going to find net.
Speaking of back passes, STL in the 66th minute, yet another goal by Klaus, given to him by Pablo Ruiz. Watch the video. It's the fourth one that's happened. I mean, third that ended in a goal, but I posted that video earlier this week where he's gotten the ball that way 4 times this season in 5 games.
We talked before after the third one, or after Klaus's first, I think it was, that we are putting ourselves in the right positions to make these kinds of shots. And there's an underlying story about our finishing and our clinical ability to finish. And that can't be overlooked. And the great thing, I actually asked Klaus this week in the pregame presser for Minnesota. I asked him, kind of without getting straight to what's up with all those back passes, sort of like, what's your perspective on how you're able to be in the right position at the right time? And how are you able to, get these passes, cut them off, take them, and finish. And so the two things that stuck out about his answer to me were he's not doing anything, right? He's just there. So it's not necessarily him doing anything other than being in the right position because he knows his teammates, and he gave all the credit to his teammates, whether it's Nelson or in this match, it was Gioacchini who put pressure on the defender to make that bad pass, to not to have to look in unfamiliar places or look in familiar places with unfamiliar results. And so he put all the praise on his teammates to be able to put the pressure on, force these either turnovers or force these passes that would otherwise be routine. And then Klaus just finds himself in that position because he knows, and he said this was the other piece, is that he just kind of knows where his teammates are going to be driving the players. So Gioacchini right there was driving Pablo Ruiz, towards the center. And so Ruiz turned around, obviously could have passed to the guy on his right, the fullback back there, did not, overlooked, went back towards the center, and Klaus was right there. This was more egregious of a back pass than the first Klaus back pass goal, because at that one, I think it was Charlotte, at least he had to have full extension to his leg to capture the ball, right? This one, it was more, he was just straight up given the ball because Ruiz was under pressure by Gioacchini, wasn't familiar with an attacking player being in that position. And then obviously the praise then goes to Klaus's ability to finish these, because if we didn't have a striker who could finish these easy opportunities in the sense that he's been given the pass, then this wouldn't be a story. It would just be a cliff note that we would be kind of musing about.
Yeah, completely agree. And it was a really cool detail in extra time quickly. But Matthew Doyle talked also about how there was some game planning involved, in his opinion, that Klaus was sitting on Pablo Ruiz's left foot. He's a left-footed player and he usually hits a hard switch with his left. And he couldn't do that. And he clearly panicked and sent it where he thought was familiar to him. Muscle memory, right there to get it. So very cool. Last goal, St. Louis in the 76th minute, a goal by Alm. He's created goals. He's missed a couple. This time he gets one. And man, he obviously works extremely hard. So it was really cool to see him get that.
The quote that Carnell said after the post-match against RSL was that Rasmus Alm stayed late at training this week. And Carnell told him last week, the game before RSL, that he was going to score based on what he was seeing in practice. And so Alm had multiple days last week where he just stayed late. And so that individual desire to do better and to be a better finisher showed here. But the thing really that got me in this sequence, it wasn't Gioacchini with the ball in the midfield. It wasn't Klaus receiving that first pass on the left. It was Edward Leuven right in the middle of the field. He attracted 5 defenders on top of him. That screenshot that Justin Horniker posted, I went back and looked at it myself to see just like how in the flow of play that occurred. And it was significant. They were on him for a few seconds. And that's a lot when you're in the flow of play. And for Leuven to absorb all of that pressure and be able to make that last pass between 2 of those defenders over to Alm, and then Alm's ability to finish here, the whole sequence was beautiful.
It was. And the guys were all there. The guys were running hard on a counterattack. So, that's how you do it. The more guys you get running in the same direction on a counterattack, the more chances you get, pass it over and over and over. And as long as someone's there, a defender might not be, especially a back post fullback. So that was really fun to watch. You are listening to Flyover Footy. We're a St. Louis podcast, and you're also listening on the Big 550 KTRS. Thank you so much for listening to us. We are going to move on now to a section where we kind of fill in some stats and news, and we kind of reflect on what's to come before we preview the next game, which in this case is Minnesota United. We thank you for joining us here. Stuart, let's start with you, man. Any thoughts on everything we talked about in Minnesota? Any stats, any news that you want to kind of start off by covering here?
Well, Minnesota was one of those teams, just like St. Louis City, who were expected to finish near the bottom of the table, wooden spoon contenders, since their star player, who really had the focus of all their attack last year, Emmanuel Reynoso, he is a troubled individual, and he is on, I think, administrative leave. Would that be
I think that's the official term they used.
Yeah, so he's had a lot of issues. I think right now he's back in Argentina trying to save his marriage. But in previous years, he's pistol whipped someone outside of a club and also done some other things. So he's an incredible player. But but also very troubled. And Minnesota's loss is our gain right now. But they've recovered and they have 8 points in 4 matches, which is a lot better than I think anyone would have expected of them at this point in the season.
Yeah, it is. And we're going to talk a lot about that. And Reynoso is going to be a big hole. It's going to be kind of a theme with Minnesota, and perhaps even just us not sure about what to say about them. But maybe before we get into that pretty deep here, Matt, do you want to talk about a few stats that you have or some news?
Yeah, it's been an interesting week from just a player perspective, because you're coming off of the quote unquote international break, which MLS did not observe. And so you had some players who weren't available in that sense, for St. Louis being Kyle Hebert and Miguel Perez. Hebert with Canada, Perez with the U19s and in America. And so you're getting both of those players back for this next game. Perez arrived on Wednesday during the day, and he was doing some regen work, trying to let the club assess his fitness. Kyle Hebert arrived late on Wednesday night, and Carnell is still working with the staffs of both U.S. and Canadian teams to kind of assess where they were on their fitness and how much action they actually saw. Hebert, we know, played about 28 minutes for Canada, so both of those players are back with the club, but their statuses and availabilities as far as minutes or restrictions, that's still unknown. Hebert, I think, is the biggest question mark, just because with him stepping back into the lineup, it poses the question, Hebert or Bartlett, essentially. Parker, you assume, is going to stick in no matter what. Bartlett has played 2 matches in 2 clean sheets now. So if Hebert is not able to start or go the full 90, because of that fitness from the past week and a half or so, I don't see a reason why Bartlett couldn't stand in. But that's going to be something to monitor, though, in the next couple of days. And as we're listening to us on the Big 550 KTRS, in a few minutes, when you see that lineup revealed, whether Hebert's going to be on the bench or in the starting lineup. The other big piece is the midfield, Jabulo Blom. So he was officially cleared from health and safety last week before RSL, and actually played 13 minutes against RSL. Thankfully, he wasn't able to need to do a whole lot, coming on as a sub for Vasilev and Leuven when we had the game up in hand 4-0. South Africa, for him, good news there. He wasn't able to travel, but they did qualify for their Cup of Nations, so he should see, hopefully, national team duty eventually. This week, though, for Minnesota, Carnell has said pretty directly that he doesn't see Jabulo Blom near starting a game yet, but it's going to be continuing to load in training and see some match minutes grow. So he also mentioned a healthy Blom is obviously better for the team, and he's going to continue to push others in competition. So when we're looking at how our lineups are going to go, and when we're going to speculate on our lineups here in a little bit, I would obviously not put Blom in the starting lineup. There's 2 other injury updates I think worth monitoring. One of them isn't as big, Jake Nerwinski. So Jake Nerwinski sat out of practice on Wednesday. Carnell said it was just a deloading day for him, helped manage a tight back that he's apparently had for a few years. But Carnell was very adamant that there wasn't anything serious. And in fact, Nerwinski was back in training on Thursday. Rasmus Alm is the other one. And Alm is noteworthy because he apparently picked up a knee contusion against RSL. And on Wednesday, we saw him leave training early, about 20 minutes in, as precautionary, it looked like. But he went in, and he didn't practice on Thursday. So his availability is in question right now. I wouldn't be surprised if he showed up on the injury list as questionable. But he's going to be one of those players similar to Tim Parker with the groin issue that they're going to be monitoring in the 48 hours between between now as we're recording and game day.
Just quickly, I think Jake Nerwinski is the only one that really worries me a lot, because we've already proven that we can go without any one of those other players, which, I don't think that I would have seen myself saying that in the preseason. But, I think Jake's played every single minute so far. Is that right?
Jake is one of 2 players now, Jake Nerwinski and Roman Berkey, to play the full 90 in every single game.
Yeah. Who's our backup right back right now, Matt, if you had to choose one? Owen O'Malley?
I would say Josh Yarrow.
Josh Yarrow?
Oh, I'd say Akil Watts.
Akil Watts or Josh Yarrow, but that was a flip of a coin. I had said Akil Watts earlier in the week, but then I don't know. It's not Owen O'Malley, I don't think. Because he played left back for City 2 last week, which we'll talk about City 2 later in our wind down. But I would say Akil Watts or Josh Yarrow potentially.
Great question. We got to move on, though, boys. Let's talk about Minnesota United. Matt, I'm just going to read your notes here. You put them in here for me, and I'm going to say it. Fourth place in the West with a 2-0-2 record, undefeated. But, Matt, I really liked some of the things you said. You posted a tweet about why they are a good matchup for us. Would you like to kind of talk about that or some other things here you've got in the notes?
Well, I mean, I don't have the tweet up in front of me, but I remember looking at their XG, their XGA, and the stats don't tell an impressive team. They don't tell the same story that you see from Seattle or LAFC. They tell the story of a low block team, a team that is vastly different than what we had seen previously with Reynoso on the field, and a team that, after getting some feedback from that tweet, they are still trying to find their identity. Talking to some Minnesota fans, they have not had consistency yet this year, just by circumstance. So their second game of the year was in a massive snowstorm, so there wasn't able. I mean, that was obviously something you can't judge a team by. And their fourth game, which was just this past week, was during that international break where they were missing some of their key players. They didn't have their full strength lineup. So we were looking really at two games, their first and third, where also they're still trying to manage life in a post Manuel Reynoso world. So what Stu is saying about his importance to the club cannot be overstated. Reynoso had 10 goals and 11 assists last year. He led the team in both of those categories and in shots with 77. The next highest on their team was their other designated player, Luis Amarillo, with 9 goals, 5 assists, single digits. And Robin Lode only had 6 goals, 2 assists. I mean, these are massive drop-offs. Reynoso also wasn't just a goal scorer for them. He had 134 successful dribbles last year. The next highest on their team was Franco Fragapane with 35. 134 to 35. Are you kidding me? Like that, the gap that Reynoso leaves has caused this lack of an identity for Minnesota. And he was a player who they didn't know he was going to be gone until the month prior, because he obviously hadn't reported to preseason, but that drug on for a period of time before it was anything official. So they weren't able to bring in help. They weren't able to retool their lineup to accommodate for missing this key centerpiece in their roster.
Yeah, that's a dangerous thing about MLS is if you lose a DP, you lose a DP, and you can't just plug that hole. So Reynoso being out is a massive, massive hole for Minnesota. And like we saw with Sporting KC last year, they lost two of their DPs, and it just absolutely sunk their whole season. So knock on wood that we stay healthy.
Yeah. But I mean, it seems less important to us. What I was going to say about Minnesota is really similar to what you said there, Stuart, that, they're one of those MLS teams that has a bunch of really hardworking players. I think Columbus was like this with their number 10 as well. Just really hardworking guys that can really put in a good shift, and then they just feed the ball to their number 10, and he does all the pretty and heavy lifting as far as the final third. You think of Carlos Gil at New England as well as like one of those type players. And so, yeah, like Stuart said, you lose him. That's a massive hole. And where do the goals come from if that person is gone? Just to bring it back to St. Louis, where I don't feel like we're that kind of team. Yes, it might hurt us if Klaus is out, but my goodness, Matt, how many different players have scored now? Is it
8?
Yeah.
8.
That's awesome for St. Louis.
I had a comment on Twitter earlier asking, kind of comparing Reynoso's loss of Reynoso to what happens if Klaus goes out. And I wanted to respond, but it would too long-winded about how Joe Aquini would have stepped up, or we would be looking at moving in our attackers a little more, getting Ostrak involved with the ball. We have that clear delineation of every single person is capable of scoring goals in this style of an offense. It doesn't seem like that's the case for Minnesota yet. And they did just sign a new player from South Korea. They are getting their international players back. So you could easily also see that we're getting them at the right time, because they have yet to find that identity. They have yet to get this reinforcement in. And in the way that they just showed their propensity to kind of let teams try and beat them, come at them, and kind of the way the stat sheets show their lack of an offensive presence, the only real worry to me is one of those like a quick counter that they're able to pass through Robin Lode, or to get Emery involved. And by making it quick and getting off one of those strikes early, I think that would be the thing that would throw us off. When you're just looking at matchups, when you're just looking at the stats, there's a lot in favor of St. Louis for this.
There are, yes, but I want to bring it back. I've said it a lot in the past, but since we are on, this is Flyover Footy on the big 550 KTRS. I'm gonna have to edit all those, but to talk about City 2 again, like I've said in the past, that Minnesota has had our number, and I know I keep repeating that, but they cross the ball across the whole field to where none of our defenders are, to someone really talented. Used to be Aziel Jackson, who we stole because he did this so well against us, in my opinion. And, they got one or two guys to try to defend against a pass, and that's a goal. I think since they know that worked against City 2, they're going to use that. I also think they're still in flux. They still are. Yes, they did just get that new attacker. They do have all 7 of those guys that were gone from international break back. But just like Hebert and Perez, like, we're not sure to what extent they're going to be in the starting lineup. For us, it must be the same for Minnesota. So I think they're still going to have to resort back to being a bunkered team, which could be difficult for us. Just like, it worked against Portland, but Portland was missing a lot of people. So yet again, like, we still haven't faced someone at full strength and difficult, but Minnesota has the experience and the playing style to get us. So that's not something to look lightly on. Stuart, any thoughts about Minnesota United? Anything we've talked about here?
No, just they are less offensively capable, and we've touched on that a bunch. But defensively, they've had some reinforcements in this off season that have really helped them. Zarek Valentin, the Puerto Rico right back, who came from Houston Dynamo. He's done well for them this year. And also Miguel Tapias, who's came from Zacatecas, I think, in Liga MX. They've both really reinforced them. And Matt, you talked about Sang Bin Yong, who
I'm glad you said the name because I would have butchered it.
I think he came on. Was he on loan or a transfer from Wolverhampton? But he was one of them. Might have been a transfer, but
he was a transfer.
He was a transfer. Yeah, they have him.
Yeah, he was a guy who had a lot of promise at one point, and he still might. But I know he was highly touted when he signed with Wolverhampton. So once they find that identity and they click, maybe they'll be dangerous. But right now, they're not, from what we've seen. So a good time to maybe catch them this season.
What do you think, Matt? Do you think, beating Minnesota United, it's just going to be everyone's expectation at this point? Do you think people, I don't know, what do you think everyone's saying about this game?
To me, everybody's saying this is the start of a 3-game kind of test of who we really are. This is the put up or shut up time, because so far the narrative has it's included how great St. Louis City is for going 5-0, but it's also included a look at who we've beaten. And there's been a lot of talk not just about who we've beaten at the time we've played them, but who we've beaten and looking at them in retrospect. So teams like Austin and Portland and San Jose, not giving us, in my opinion, the due credit that we deserve, because we've beaten these teams as they're sitting right now are playoff teams. Yes, they might not have been. Austin wasn't the team that we thought they would be to come out the gate, but they did have CCL to contend with as well, and we know how that goes for MLS teams to juggle. So now it's kind of Minnesota's that first undefeated team, but there's also these underlying things that are baked into a 2-0-2 record for Minnesota. Who they've beaten and kind of where they've gotten where they've gotten to from here. Past Minnesota, there's a massively different story with Cincinnati and Seattle. But to me right now, I wouldn't expect to see this. If we beat Minnesota, I think we'll get a little more credit, obviously, continue the winning streak. But they'll still be the same kind of detractors nationally or from other team that looks to, this is a Minnesota team without an identity. They're still figuring themselves out. There'll be those excuses kind of baked in regardless of what we do here. So to me, the narrative isn't so much about us getting the respect that we deserve anymore. It's just more so about what we've been doing up until now. Just keep gathering those 3 points. Keep hauling them in. Keep building our lead and our top of the table performance. That's what I just want to focus on us at this point. That I've gotten tired of seeing the different reasons why we're undefeated. And so I'm more so focused on just the fact that we are undefeated 5 games in. And if we do end up beating Minnesota, which again, it's a home match too, that can't be overlooked. That's another advantage that we clearly have. So there'll always be excuses, even after whatever happens with Cincinnati and Seattle. There'll be excuses no matter what on why St. Louis is fluky. And in fact, the funniest thing to me is you can tell how desperate other clubs' fans are at this point to find reasons why St. Louis is doing what we're doing when Lutz Pfannenstiel's past is coming into certain things he's wrote about in his book about being in a Singaporean, I think, prison for match fixing allegations, which were completely debunked. He was released without incident. Like, it was obviously a setup, and he wrote about it, and that's being pulled out as if, oh, I wonder how St. Louis is able to come about this. It's bizarre things like that fans are having to come to grips to find reasons why St. Louis is so good at doing what they're doing right now.
Yeah, this incredible match fixing conspiracy that's going on, as if Lutz is paying center backs to flub back passes.
Right.
It's just absolutely absurd. And yet someone pulled it out I saw on Reddit as like a gotcha moment. You're like, oh, are you serious? It's not a gotcha moment. He wrote about it. Everyone knows about it. It's not the easiest, most simple thing is that defending in MLS is not up to par of other leagues, and Carnell and Lutz know that, and they set up the team to take advantage of that. It's not rocket science.
Yeah, and there's something too, I don't think anyone can put a finger on it quite yet, but there's something to, all the variables, and that being that, I do think that we're going to be especially good early in the season, like we've talked about, because we're a pressing team. Players make more mistakes early in the season. They haven't gotten to know each other, and we are the kind of team that can take advantage of that better than a lot of other teams. So, I'm just really curious to see if it can be sustained. And the doubters, I've gotten to the point now where, yes, I mean, the allegations about Lutz are absolutely ridiculous, but people can only work with what they've experienced. Everyone, it's become a statistic driven commentary league, right? And the stats, we're breaking records. Everything is totally different with us in the way that we're winning. And it's just hard for people to grasp. And even as a biased fan, I can't explain exactly what's happening or how it can be sustainable. But we can, just, hope that it's going to keep going and see certain stats that typically do keep going and going and going. But, I don't know, all that to say that it is understandable to me why everyone is shocked that we're doing this, because really no one's done it.
Well, and my favorite thing too is that it's the team and the system that is almost showing MLS that there can be a designated team version of success here. And I've come to love that term now after what's happened the past few weeks. You mentioned it, Phil, the 8 different players who've scored a goal now with Alm's goal against RSL. And the fact that we mentioned earlier just in passing, if Klaus were to go out, Joe Keeney would step in. We'd still run our 4-2-3-1. Sam Adeniran would probably step in. Mm-hmm. Those kinds of depth thing. We're down to our 4th center back, I think it was. So with Nilsson, Parker, Hebert out, like those kinds of things, we're down to like Bartlett, Yarrow, Bell, like that level where we have that depth that can step in. Blom's been out. Indy Vasilev steps in. Perez goes out. You have Akil Watts able to step in. You have all of these players who are great in this system so far through 5 games, but some of them have even been castaways by other team. You have the overt castaways that we picked up in the expansion draft, where 4 of those players are starters for us right now. 5 if you count Tim Parker. But you also have guys like Jake Nerwinski, who was being severely misused in Vancouver by the end. He was being played so far out of position, and he is so ready to talk about the fact that he loves playing right back. That's his home. So you put him there in a system that mirrors to the umpteenth degree what he was playing in Vancouver, and you're obviously going to pull the best out of him. You've got Jared Stroud, who was a literal castaway from Austin, didn't see any time with them, and he's doing what he's doing out here. In addition to pulling guys in that they've scouted from across the world. So you have all these different mixes and matches of players that have, either been soured in the past, or this is their first opportunity and they're being looked at to prove themselves here, like an Ostrak and a Jensen, for something bigger down the line, or you have just MLS castoffs. I mean, they're all these things pulled together in the system where everybody is confident, everybody trusts each other, and they know at this point, it seems pretty obviously, they know where each other is going to be in any given moment. My favorite, I think it was the Quakes game, I want to say, Joe Keeney's first goal, where he knew where Nelson was going to place the ball to him in the box just by looking at him. Like he knew where he had to be, and he sprinted a little extra. He mentioned that post game and after that, where it's starting to be this second nature. You just know where guys are going to put the ball. You know where guys are going to be. And it doesn't matter where they came from. It matters that they've been in this system for so long, and they're able to apply that so early on in MLS.
And that's the kind of stuff that works all season long.
That's sustainable.
Yes, exactly. And we're not banking on turnovers high. That's what we feast on, but that's not what we bank on. The talent has been shown in just certain moments of owning the ball in the opponent's third for a long spell. That's been happening. That's cool to watch.
I mean, we lead the league in high turnovers, so that's just a consistent part of our game. But we don't need to rely on these back passes that we've created chances off of. When you also lead the league in goals for with 15, setting tying the record so far for that, setting a record for the biggest goal difference through 5 games. Those kinds of things are what you can build off of in multiple parts of the field, whether it's coming in from a corner kick or a strike from Klaus outside the box, or defensive pressure or offensive pressure on their defense. That can, all these things can play together in different ways that we're able to score the goals.
And possessing the ball in the final third might be something we see against Minnesota too. So we might have to prove ourselves. City might have to prove themselves in that regard. Plenty in this game. The last thing I wanted to bring up before we do some predictions is that I think I'm looking forward a lot. You kind of touched on it, Matt. The next 2 games after this, Seattle Sounders and FC Cincinnati, very quality teams, well-drilled teams. They're showing their quality by winning. And so that's where we really see St. Louis's true tests. What do they look like against those teams? It's going to be a massive challenge. And I can't wait for that, because I do think it's going to also just confirm a lot of our belief in the team even if it doesn't come out in all wins, I think it'll show that they're a quality side as well.
My favorite thing about this team too, that Carnell has mentioned multiple weeks in a row, is how they reset every week and they focus on the opponent ahead. So they're aware of all the accolades. Talking to Leuven, talking to Klaus, they're aware of the recognition that they're receiving. But Leuven in particular had said last week that he's just not letting anything change his style, and he knows how he got these accolades were by focusing on himself and doing what he needs to do. So taking it week by week, I'm sure they're aware of what Cincinnati and what Seattle have been doing and where they are in the power rankings and what their visibility is in not only the standings, but in perception. So I love this thing about our team where you hear it all the time. It's easy to say something like that, but they're able to show it. And so that's why I'm not worried about anything. We've talked about Minnesota a lot in good and bad. I'm not worried about our team overlooking them in the slightest.
Let's move on to predictions. And Stuart, I want to start with you. We'll do the starting lineup, and then we'll go around after we give our lineup guesses and guess perhaps the score, which is not all of our favorite part, but we're going to do it anyway. So Stuart, what do you think the starting 11 might look like?
I'm going to go with the same starting 11 as last week. I'm actually going to go with Bartlett over Hebert, but I think Hebert probably will start. But my guess is Bartlett. He's just been impressive. I'm going to ride with him. And I'm going to go with 3-1, and I'll do a goal by Ostrak, a goal by Klaus, and a goal by Big Sam.
Woo!
Ooh.
I like that. What do you
love
think,
it.
Matt?
He got his first one. I don't want to say the exact same thing as Stu, even though I might think. So I'll say different with that caveat. I'll say that Hebert will start. I think the job is his when he's back to full fitness, and that dude is just an Iron Man. So I'll say Nelson, Parker, Hebert, Nerwinski, Leuven, Vasilev. I'm going to say Jensen gets the start, though, too, with Ostrak and then Klaus and Gioacchini up top.
Interesting. So you are going 4-4-2. Okay, good.
Yeah,
so,
4-4-2.
I do want to say 4-2-3-1, and I think if Alm is in, I think we definitely go 4-2-3-1. And I'm only saying that because I think that's what we used against Portland, and I think we're going to have a similar game plan against Portland. Yeah, Portland was away, and am I wrong?
You're right.
Okay. So I think Ostrak and now I'm blanking. Stroud and Alm will start in the attacking midfield. And then the rest, I agree with Hebert. I think Hebert's going to start.
Does your opinion change if Alm's not able to go?
I don't know. Your Jensen shout? Yes. In my opinion, yes. We do 4-4-2 if Alm can't go. But
cool.
Yeah.
I didn't give a score prediction. I'll say 3-0. Let's go. Let's keep the clean sheet party going.
Does Jackson make your bench?
Yes.
Absolutely.
He makes the bench and he plays with City 2 on Sunday as well.
Yeah, Minnesota 2 is traveling with Minnesota, I assume, because
they'll play on Sunday.
Yeah, so that's an interesting thing. Smart move by MLS there in that regard. I'm gonna say 2-1. So I'm not gonna guess who's gonna score, but I think St. Louis will win 2-1. I think Minnesota's gonna give us some trouble. I really do. But I think at them having some guys out, we're not going to see their best. I think our next game against Minnesota is going to be the one to watch, how much they improve and how good they are against us.
They run a low block on defense, but one quick shout is that they have one of the fewest passes per play, so passes per sequence, and they like to play a little more direct than some of the teams we've played so far too. So a lot more direct than an Austin, a lot more direct than the Quakes. So they will play a low block on the defense, but they might give us some issues in transition.
I think so too. And actually, directness, maybe that's a good shot for Bartlett. If they're going to lump it long, Bartlett's the bigger, taller guy than Hebert. Not that Hebert's had any trouble in the air, but anyway, something to watch for. That's it from us, guys. Thank you so much for listening. If you're listening on the radio, enjoy the game. You might be walking in right now. Hopefully we got you guys ready to watch this game and maybe some things to look for against Minnesota. We are Flyover Footy, and you're listening to us on the Big 550 KTRS. Thank you, everybody. We'll be talking to you next week.
Go City.
2 for 4 on the station identification.
Hey, I liked it. I'll do better next week on actually not taking the load off of you a little bit.
Oh yeah, it was nice. I didn't have to think about it. You know what I'm going to do though is I'm going to put a paper on the wall just real big, because if I just read it, I won't have to think about it. Nice. I get nervous and overthink it. We're still streaming, so but I did hit stop on the recording.
We got some questions. I'm so excited for questions. I forgot to put a tweet out asking for them earlier today because it's been one of those days. But Joe and Aaron.
Ooh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. I'm going to pop this and then we'll start the wind down here. So, I think the goal should be, Matt, you and I talked about this. I don't know. I'm going to try to keep this wind down to about 30 minutes. So, if it gets to 20 minutes long, definitely highlight a couple things to make sure I don't cut you off before you want to leave. Is that cool?
Sounds good. We don't have a whole ton of topics left to go anyway, so I'm ready when you're. I'm gonna go grab a drink real quick, but feel free to start without me.
Sounds good.
Hey Aaron, good feedback on Sing Bin Young. He was with Grasshoppers in Switzerland. Sorry, I got my dog on my lap now. Oh, yeah, that's a good question. Grab a third DP. Well, that's obviously Firmino.
Well, hold on. Let's start. Let's actually start. I'm just going to keep everything you just said. But this is Flyover Footy. It's the wind down. Thanks for sticking with us after the break there, after we did our radio segment. Stuart, you want to kind of read some of those questions and kind of reply again? I want to talk about Songbin Young as well because he's an interesting player.
Yeah, Joseph Ilif had some good questions. Will we see Minnesota try to back pass in their end of the pitch, or will their coach instruct their players not to? With their, obviously our magical abilities to get those back passes. And also he had, is it hard for Berkey to captain from the goal? He had to make some big saves to keep RSL from scoring the first half. Does that indicate a challenge to managing the defense?
What do you think, Stuart? Let's start with the first one.
I mean, both teams are going to invite possession. I mean, Minnesota and St. Louis, we were 28th and 29th in possession statistics going into this week. Matt, as our stats guy, was that accurate?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, neither team wants the ball.
Yeah, it's going to be hot potato. So, but I think we can make them pay. Minnesota, though, I think they're going to play as they will normally. I think to try to adjust their game plan too much, specifically to avoid Klaus. In my opinion, you don't want to get in your own head on something like that, especially with the crowd that's going to be so loud on Saturday. I think they will try to keep their game plan, and Adrian Heath's not going to specifically tell them to avoid back passes.
On the passing in general, so we had I mentioned earlier that Minnesota doesn't like to have many passes per sequence, so they're quick, and then the sequence ends one way or another. If you remember playing San Jose and what their style was, San Jose is second in the league in overall passes attempted, and Minnesota is dead last in the league. But the difference is stark. I mean, it is massively stark, and so San Jose has completed 2,045 passes. Minnesota's completed 924. And yes, they've played one less game, but if you can extrapolate 924 over 4 games, like that's far less than 300 passes, that's worse than a St. Louis statistic as far as number of passes. So if you think how often we pass and what our passes look like, that's kind of wild to think. There's only a couple teams in the league around our number, and it's Minnesota, New York Red Bulls, Chicago Fire, us, Portland, like those kinds of teams. And so to me, I think obviously going forward, every team's going to be on the guard for those back passes. That to me is a given, where if you're a coach and you're not at least cautioning against that, then you're doing your job wrong. But I think that the nature of how their low block is going to transition into moving the ball up, I don't see a lot of horizontal movement among their back line. So that's an opportunity for our game and our pressure to dictate the flow of play. If we're able to force them into more passes in their defensive third, that'll be a really good sign for us.
The other thing that was about that Klaus goal against Real Salt Lake, the back pass, that was the other thing Matt Doyle said, was that his normal outlet, his emergency outlet in the midfield, was like nowhere to be found. So he was upfield and he was guarded and blocked off by our midfield. So that's another thing is, we're forcing these mistakes, not just one player. It's not just because Klaus is there. That's what you said, Matt, actually. But
yeah.
That was a cool example.
Well, so I'm visualizing what you're talking about and mentioning the left-footedness of Pablo Ruiz. And the thing that struck me in watching the replay is the fact that he had a fullback to his right that he completely ignored. And
I know. Yeah.
He turned back around. But I juxtapose that against what St. Louis has done, because we get pressured in our defensive third a decent amount. And you have players like Indiana Vassilev is a perfect example to me. So against Portland in particular, I was really frustrated at his inability to move the ball up the field and have to check back down to our fullbacks, to center backs. But he was successful in those. He was smart with his checkdowns, his back passes, so to speak. And when you talk about a team needing to do that, is there any more valuable of a resource when you're needing to pass the ball back than a keeper who is good with the ball at his feet and good with distribution?
he's had to get rid of it quickly, and he doesn't always punt it in those situations. Sometimes he sends it directly to a guy's foot or his chest. It's been incredible what Berkey's been doing back there. He's so trustworthy.
And
Yeah.
it's just it's another defender that we have the ability to pass to, and teams don't do that, or at least they don't look to that as their option 1 or 2, or they don't make that a part of their game plan. And that's an extra player on the field that we have when we're feeling that kind of pressure. And that's why one of the reasons why I think we've been successful in avoiding that.
Stuart, is it hard for Berkey to captain from goal?
I don't particularly think so. I mean, a goaltender's job is to kind of manage the back line. And also with Parker out there as the vice captain, you really have both of them kind of leading. I'm not out there with them, but I haven't seen any dearth of leadership.
Yeah.
I remember back to preseason, there was a leadership council put together by our coaching staff. I don't know if it was by our coaching staff or if they just volunteered, how that formed. But I wish I had it in front of me. It was Berkey, Parker, Yarrow, Leuven, and I'm missing somebody. It might have been Kyle Hebert, to be honest.
Nielsen was in there, but while Nielsen wasn't present for treatment, Hebert stepped in.
Well, yeah, and it was everybody who wore the armband in the preseason, basically. But my point is, though, getting to Berkey and how he captains from the net. Lutz and Bradley have spoken in the past about how, yes, it is somewhat unique for a keeper to be a captain, especially in the MLS world, but it's not necessarily unique when you have someone of the caliber with the experience and vision that Berkey has. And so by allowing him to be captain of the overall team and of that back line, like Stu said, you still have those leaders on the field who can drive the flow of play, who can dictate and inform and coach other players up. Edward Leuven and Tim Parker being key, like you mentioned, Parker. But when you're on the attacking end, I think too, there's a lot of us and not me, which helps the fact that your keeper is in net. I'm sorry, your captain's in net.
And Joseph, not to make this sound like a silly question, because it's been asked in my favorite podcast to listen to is Scuffed, and Greg on that podcast is a goalkeeper and a goalkeeper coach. And so someone asked that same question of, I forgot who, I don't know if Turner was captain one day or something for the men's national team. And he was like, it was exactly that. It was a counterattack. And someone was like, is it bad like that, Turner hasn't stopped that? Is it bad that he's the captain in those situations? And Greg was able to kind of say something like, it's a counterattack is a counterattack. It's fast. It's not like you can say, hey, watch out for the counterattack before it hits you. It's just like it is. It's happening. And that goal, the thing you're talking about, I assume was that counterattack that I was thinking about with RSL. Anyway, I agree. I don't think it's a big deal. I don't think Carnell thinks it's a big deal, or he wouldn't have allowed it. You know what I mean? So another question is good. The Songbin Young. I'm not sure if the J is hard or silent or soft. But while he came from Wolves, this is from Aaron Scott. He had spent his entire time with them on loan at Grasshoppers in Switzerland, and I believe he only or mostly played for their U21 squad. Yeah, that's true. And what I just want to say a couple things that I learned about him. That he hasn't gotten good minutes in a good league. He played in the Korean First League. He got 6 goals and 2 assists in 24 appearances, 1,600 minutes. That's kind of like similar to what Alm did in the Swedish league. And so I was kind of dismissing Jung. And then I thought about it. I was like, a team like Minnesota, first of all, they're signing in a U22 initiative.
Yeah, that's the thing.
He was literally they literally quoted Minnesota's coach, me and names. I'm sorry, I don't have it. Adrian Heath. They quoted him saying that they want him in 2026 when he expects Jung to start for the South Korean national team in the World Cup. And so they want to sell him off after that kind of a showcase situation. So he's one for the future. But, I doubted Alm a little bit, and I think I'm being shown that I was wrong. So maybe I shouldn't do that about Jung as well.
Well, that kind of pedigree coming into the league from the St. Louis side hasn't necessarily been needed, right?
It's true.
Of our
could be different,
and that's why a lot of people underestimated what St. Louis is doing, because they didn't have those brand names almost. Klaus, Alm, Ostrak, Jensen, even. And this is only an upside signing. The U22 initiative is absolutely key to roster flexibility. Doesn't hit the cap at more than about 150,000, and they have control over him for a significant period of time. And that pathway, like there's an article in MLS Soccer that talks about Leo Campana from Inter Miami took the Wolves to Grasshoppers loan pathway, and so there's this network that's kind of being seen and driven on success. And I have no doubt he's going to be exciting for Minnesota and South Korea in general to have. I'm just glad that we don't have to deal with him later on in the season in form. We'll have to deal with him in September potentially.
He had to clear their visa system. He had to get his visa rather. So he is clear. I just saw that today before we started here. Stuart, you answered this question already, but repeat your answer. And then let's all think about a different third DP that we might want. Perhaps we can all answer this, but if St. Louis was to grab a third DP, who would it be?
Yeah, my third DP choice would be Firmino.
Hard choice.
I mean, he's the dream. If you can make that signing happen, you make it happen. Even if you have to make every other team in MLS pay for your player to play for you, that's a whole nother question. And
maybe we should talk about that.
Yeah, who am I talking about? Firmino's my choice, but ultimately, I expect Lutz to have someone in mind probably already that they're targeting if the opportunity comes up. And at this point, I trust Lutz to know who to sign and who needs to fit in, because there aren't any glaring holes in the lineup right now or anywhere that we would need to plug in a DP. Keith also asked about, I saw this top bid 90 predicted that we'd lose. I mean, they probably predicted that we'd lose to them in the home opener. So sorry.
They did. Receipts in hand.
Yeah. So they'll be wrong again. Sorry.
Love it. You guys ever talk about Jensen being flagged as a young DP?
I saw he was listed as young DP on the MLS Soccer site, but I also saw some other glaring inconsistencies or errors, straight up errors. One of them being that they have us with 31 people on our roster, and that's impossible under roster rules. So the other thing that doesn't make sense on that front is a young DP's purpose is to sign them for a significant amount of money and have them hit the cap at a certain value. Jensen from last year's MLS PA salary numbers was only making 148,250 guaranteed, and we had him on a free transfer. That right there is under the dollar amount to where a young DP would be worthwhile. So I don't know why you would classify him in that unless his first year salary and second year salary were markedly different, which could be the case. We'll find out in a few months when those new numbers are released. But that designation doesn't make sense to me. What I do think, though, from Stu's point of Firmino or bringing in somebody, we also have flexibility on the international roster slot. We also have that flexibility because Max Schneider has been loaned down at the current point, season-long loan to City 2. That frees up an international slot for him. So we only have 9 internationals on the book right now, 2 slots open with Schneider down with City 2. There's a lot of movement that can happen with those 2 roster slots in the summer transfer window. So whether it's Firmino or somebody else, I would definitely say DP or otherwise, we're going to be bringing in people this summer.
And for me, a young DP, like it's going to be something flashy and awesome, or at least someone with massive upside. So I wouldn't think Jensen fits that profile. Is he just too old to be? He's not.
Oh no, he's plenty young.
Not a U22 initiative, Matt. I don't remember.
Same thing. Dollars. I mean, U22s hit the budget low, and that's their purpose. You can bring guys in, pay them higher, and they only hit your salary budget at a $150,000-$200,000.
Oh, so he just hasn't been. He's not paid higher than that. Is what you're saying?
That's what and I could be shocked.
Right.
Yeah, I could be shocked when the new MLSPA numbers come out, but that's the only thing I can consistently point back to is his what his base is lower than that, and his guaranteed is less than 150,000 from last year's numbers. It doesn't make sense for any kind of a designation, even though he fits the qualifications for them. First MLS contract. He was 18 years old when he was signed, those kinds of things.
While we're talking about Jensen, I want to do a little bit of a hot take here, in that, I might be sticking my foot in my mouth like I have with Alm, and even like super early non-public comments about Leuven. But Jensen, who I like better than Jensen right now so far in the season, and it's too early to say this is a legitimate take, but Celio has looked so good in the final minutes of the games. I bet his expected assist is a decent number for the amount of minutes he's been in, because several of his passes could have been goals. Several, not just a couple. Like, he is just made to be a super sub, dribble around a tired guy. He's looked so good. And so far, I kind of like him better than Jensen, even though Jensen looked pretty good, like a good downhill runner in that last game. He reminds me of early Pulisic, in that he's just really good at carrying the ball from midfield to the final third. Or maybe a Musa. Not James Musa.
Eunice.
Musa for the Eunice, thank you. That's my thought. I don't know if you guys want to disagree with me so that we as a podcast aren't blamed for a bad take.
I'll be honest. I don't, other than being consistently good and doing what he needs to do on the field, like, I haven't spent a whole lot of time analyzing Celio, because he, like you said, he comes in towards the end and he just makes the game go the way it needs to go, because he's fast. He puts pressure on people. He's always closing gaps. I want to see him get a goal, because I think that would just be the cherry on top of what he's been able to do towards the end of the game.
Agree.
But he's been a firecracker coming in and not just from a skill level, but from a hyping the team up. His laughter, you guys you've seen it in training. His laughter is infectious with everybody. He's just that quality person to be around. And that's having him come on the field to the end of these games is almost just that mental spark you need to finish it all out.
Agree. We have a good question I want to hit. Tim's Bucket Hat is a great Twitter account.
I love that one.
He says, anybody know what the Ravioli Boys merch is going to be? I'm glad we can talk about this. Thanks for asking that question.
I think they teased today it's a jersey and a shirt.
Oh, they said the words jersey and shirt?
Well, they said top. They called it a toasted top. And then they said something else with it, but it's this Saturday at 4 p.m. If you're down if you're going to the game, or if you're not, go down to City Park at 4 p.m. at the garage, that new garage across the street. They're finally doing a pop-up shop on the first floor, which they touted when they first announced Stu's favorite garage. And they're selling, as long as they last, those the toasted top and whatever other toasted shirt they have.
I'm looking for Celio XA stats and I can't find them, but I want to post that later.
Toasted top and TRAV, TEE-RAV.
Oh yeah, that was witty. I liked that. Stuart, any thoughts? Anything you want to talk about?
Well, I'm just hoping that they retweet that video they did last year of all the players tasting the St. Louis foods. That would be a nice throwback leading up into this Saturday's game, where we'll see those amazing T-Rav jerseys or tops. You think they'll be worn on the warm-up, Matt?
I hope so.
If MLS allows them to, that would be amazing.
That would be sweet.
That would be really cool.
I'm in love with that idea.
I love how this is the April 1st thing for them. The first April 1st thing was this Ravioli Boys shirt that I've got on, and now just running with it. I think it's fun. Why not?
Agree. Let's start hitting the news at the end of our notes here, Matt. Generation Adidas Cup. I didn't even think about this until today when I heard about it on Extra Time. I'm so freaking excited. Tell us all about it.
I would be more excited if we could watch one single city match. But anyway, Generation Adidas Cup.
Sorry, David Goss said he thought it was going to be on Apple. So I think
City match.
Oh,
City. They
pardon
released
me.
the schedule. They released the schedule and City
Oh,
didn't make
so
the
none
cut
of
for the
ours are
group stage.
televised.
Yeah. Anyway, take a step back. Generation Adidas Cup is basically the pinnacle tournament for MLS Next and international academies that MLS has invited. There are 49 clubs from 12 countries in a almost week and a half tournament where there's a group stage, 3 matches in the group stage, and then they go into knockout rounds to kind of crown a champion, more or less. It's the pinnacle. It's an identification type of a tournament. There are the playoffs, there are showcases. Every team is guaranteed to play, what was it? 7 matches, I think. And yeah, 7 60-minute matches comprised of 2 30-minute halves is what every team is guaranteed to play. Starting April 1st, going through April 9th. And it will be at the U15 and U17 age groups. So St. Louis City will have representation for both of those. And both cities' U17 and U15 teams play April 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, but none of them are televised, even though some of these select group stage matches will be on MLS Season Pass on Apple TV.
Who are our opponents?
The U17s play Remo Stars FC, Portland Timbers, and Strikers FC, which is the only non-MLS academy in MLS Next who's been invited. And the U15s have a little more flashier of a schedule. They play Charlotte FC, Seattle Sounders, and Arsenal.
Cool. That's why I was excited, because there's legit academies from all over the world in this thing. So I'm glad we get a good opponent in that age group at least.
This is like the 14th year they've done the Generation Adidas Cup, and it's taken on a lot more, I think, importance since the dissolution of the USDA, right alongside MLS Next kind of sprouting up. But the concept of 49 clubs from 12 countries with, you're talking Arsenal, Barcelona, Manchester United, I think Juventus has their academy. All of these global powers, so more or less, invited to play, and just seeing the next generation of American MLS talent competing against those academies it's a fun concept, and it's exciting to have it on MLS Season Pass. Finally able to watch it a little easier, because they put matches on YouTube in the past, but YouTube's not the greatest interface for trying to find things. Apple themselves are still figuring that out, but it's nice to be able to just open up the app that most of us have at this point, and that we have live matches coming up all weekend on.
Apple's been a success. Don't you agree, Stuart?
I'm happy with it. I just wish they would fix their audio levels on their mixing. It's been absolutely awful, and something that I've seen a lot of people around the league talking about as well. So I know it's just not my TV, but they have to figure out how to, talk and not be silent, and then have the crowd noise be too loud. And Timbers, I think there was some cursing that they were picking up on, so they dropped that audio level, and then the commentators, they didn't match, and it was just a mess. But they'll figure that out. But as far as the accessibility, it's been good.
I've been scarred by my ex-boyfriend, which is MLS Next Pro, which was just terrible.
Yeah, well, when you have no expectations, anything's good.
Exactly.
I was excited to see Next Pro as a part of this, but I was bummed that they didn't have replays up. I would have liked to have seen the City Park City 2 match, having been there, but they don't have replays up for Next Pro.
Yeah, in fact, I wanted to kind of highlight. I might still try to use the highlights because I think they're up, but I was going to try to highlight the tactics Minnesota United 2 used against us with Azeel Jackson last year, and just kind of post it in case the same exact stuff happened. It'd be cool to see. But no replays then for sure. And I was wondering if they would have them for this. The replay's not on Apple, is it?
No.
That's really sad.
Very sad.
I'm going to complain about that publicly somewhere. Let's talk about, we got one more topic here. Enterprise Community Corner.
This was a fun one.
Interesting one. Yeah.
I I don't know what I was doing, but I missed this story for a few hours when it was first gone up. But I thought I saw it come across, and I was like, "Oh, they partnered with Enterprise. That's hilarious because it's like partnering with your brother or something like that." But in reality, what this is similar to other teams um, that have provided tickets in the stadium complimentary for certain community causes. And this particular one is Enterprise and City partnering to provide up to 159 seats each game to local St. Louis community organizations that are furthering the growth and revitalization of St. Louis that support a range of civic and philanthropic causes. So I don't know which groups in particular, but you see those buzzwords and you think of companies and organizations that are doing good for the community around you, and their organizations are more or less being rewarded by partnering to just bring them into City Park, get more fans involved. And I think that can only be a good thing. 159 seats out of the 22,500, and I just think it's a great thing that the club's doing.
Agree. I mean, I don't want to be this guy, but do we feel like this is, I mean, maybe they were always going to do this, but do we feel like this is a response to like the weird smart ticketing stuff that's been happening this season, Stuart? I mean, I know I saw you pretty upset about this.
Like the dynamic pricing?
Oh, sorry. Dynamic pricing. Yeah.
Yeah, dynamic pricing is here to stay. I think that's kind of an industry staple at this point. But no, I'm not happy about it, but it's something we live with, and I'll always find something to be upset about. We'll put it that way. And but I'm happy that at least City 2 prices, I think, are spot on for season tickets. So people who are priced out of City home games, and especially by a secondhand price or secondary market, City 2 games, $105 gets you season tickets for City 2, and you get to experience City Park and the amazing facility that it is, and watch some great upcoming talent. But yeah, no, I could rant all day about dynamic pricing, but it's probably not. I'm probably not the smartest person or most educated on the topic. So yeah, no, I should probably not.
Well, it was just on my brain. The only reason I bring it up is because it was on my brain because of the men's national team. Is like every time that kind of topic comes up.
Yeah, they
the most egregious.
Yeah, that picture that came out and went viral again, that was MLS Buzz who tweeted that out, and I believe that was in 2019. There was a 2018. There was a summit. U.S. Soccer Federation had a summit in Florida, and they just broke it down where they, it's better for U.S. Soccer if they get 15,000 people at $50 a ticket than if they get 25,000 people at $25 a ticket. And for them, it's a numbers game. That's all it is. And that's how it's been for years. And I think that really is how the whole industry is, that U.S. Soccer was just a little more naked about it. And that screenshot went out, and it's been floating around for years. And every time that you have a U.S. game with 10,000 people attending because tickets are $100 a pop, you put it out there because that's how they price everything.
And I don't want to come across as a rabble rouser, because that was like such a positive thing that they just did with the Enterprise Community Corner. I'm all for it. I really respect it. I think it's, I think the way I phrased it was like, there's something romantic about, making sure that anyone can access one part of the stadium, or filling a stadium with tickets that are affordable best you can. And, MLS and US Soccer don't get that as large organizations, but here we see our club doing something deliberately to get, anyone in there, like making sure that no one is totally left out of the game. After they've spent about $1 billion on this club, that's where I defend the dynamic pricing, especially in these first couple years after we started this club and they spent $1 billion. Who am I to say they can't charge whatever they want to charge in each seat? But, there's the one thing I will say is just that there's some romanticism to making sure that you get tons of cheap seats that anyone can go fill them with. You think of the Bundesliga in that regard, that they make sure that they've got, the yellow wall is full of cheap tickets.
It's almost like we're seeing the literal clash of the old versus the new, where cities talked up this massive game of being a community partner and a neighbor. You're seeing the stadium built in what has, it's getting some infill of residential around it and getting some commercial things built up around it to make it seem more homey, more like some of those areas in England and in Germany that are close knit with their community. But at the same time, you're facing the reality of capitalism. You're facing the reality of 21st century markets and needing to make money because of the investment you've made into this league. And so you're juxtaposing those two ideals almost, where the first is the romanticism that you're speaking to, and the second is the American reality of soccer that just exists. And I think it's a tough line to toe when you're trying to speak about all the altruistic things that you want to do and that the values that you hold dear, and you're trying to live those values while still needing to do some things that they have to fund certain things, like ticketing prices or whatever kind of partnerships end up being, like you have to make money, and dynamic pricing is just a reality of that on the capitalism side.
Yeah. And even the Bundesliga is towing the line. They're having a hard time holding on to that. So, life is life. Covered it well there, Matt. Thank you. Anything else we want to talk about before we go? We're doing great on time, guys.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things on City that I've heard and I asked Carnell were kind of lineup thoughts. So trying to get a peek into how he's viewing setting lineups, especially given health. And so looking at that for a second, there's two kind of things that he had said recently on setting lineups and depth, especially in the attacking mid. And when I asked him a couple weeks ago about the attacking mid depth, especially because we seem to be plentiful up there consistently. The injury bug has not hit them, knock on wood, but especially when you look at the two striker formations that we've been running the past couple of games. He said in regards to the depth in the attacking mid, Carnell did, it's no reflection of form. It's just a reflection of what the opponent might give us. So we have a bunch of these guys, Isak Jensen, Jared Stroud, Rasmus Alm, Tomas Ostrak, for two positions. We have 4 players, but you can see the power, whether we bring Tomas in late in games or whether we bring Isak on late in games, Rasmus on late. I think we have some real good momentum when we bring guys in. And that really was personified by what happened with RSL. And it was, I hate to use the term, I don't hate it too much, but I don't mean disrespect when I say it, but the plug and play mentality. And Tim Parker even briefly, he used the term, but he briefly alluded to it's kind of like it's plug and play in the sense that everybody is bought into the system. Everybody knows their role, and you can take out one guy for whatever reason and put the next guy up in his place, and you're not really going to miss a beat. And that speaks a lot to that attacking front. But the other piece of this is Nico Gioacchini in particular. So I asked Carnell this week if Gioacchini has, I use the term opponent agnostic, if he's become that kind of a player when it comes to the lineup. And it's, you obviously see the form that he's in, but when I think of opponent agnostic on our team, I think of Klaus, I think of Leuven, I think of Tim Parker. I'm probably going to think of Joachim Nilsson, Jake Nerwinski at this point, and Roman Berkey. That's probably the extent of opponent agnostic. And to become one of those players where you're not going to take them out, you can put them in the lineup in pen every single game if they're healthy. That's a big deal on a team that has this level of depth and plug and play-ism going on. He did say that he doesn't view Nico as that player. He views Nico more as able to fit in when he needs him to. And he aligned him more with the group that I just mentioned as far as any given Saturday. So not to or in detriment of his form or anything like that. But it's an interesting indication of, as we predict lineups, kind of how that's viewed from the club's perspective and what that depth really means. Because whoever's not picked in the starting lineup, like, it's proven fact that they're going to be difference makers in the second half.
That's well said. I think I daydream a lot about exactly that thing, which how much is it game planning and how much is it just picking the hot hand / rotating, I don't know. I mean, maybe only Carnell knows, maybe only the whole leadership, all the coaching staff knows, but I wonder that a lot. And I'm right now, I'm truly leaning toward it not being game planning. I don't know. Maybe I'm not giving Carnell enough credit, but once Nico started away, I was like, okay, I think now we're on the hot hand. It just feels that way.
Well, and that's kind of why a guy like John Nelson is still starting every single game. Yes,
Right.
he's obviously earned it, but that's the thing, is he earned the spot right out of the gate and he hasn't given up hold on it. There's been no reason to take him out. Undefeated streak aside, even like his quality of play has forced him to stay in the lineup. And that to me is the personification of riding the hot hand, where there is a guy on his heels, we assume, in Selmer Pedro, who you can get in, and they were competing really hard in preseason, but he just hasn't let up. So if he's not an opponent agnostic at this point, he very well might be.
Yeah, that was a fun interchange on Twitter with Hasib and you. It was a cool conversation because Pedro, like, we all know his quality, and it's been, I think, the biggest shock as far as the guy that you didn't expect to not play at this point in the season.
Agreed. And he was the guy when Parker might not have been able to go, that Carnell was asked and even tossed out, yeah, we might consider him at left center back.
Crazy stuff. Stuart, maybe we can close with any thoughts you might have, including perhaps you want to wax poetic about fatherhood or Felicity. Any stories you want to tell us?
No, fatherhood's great so far. I'm enjoying all the diaper changes. No, so far she's a very relaxed baby, not fussy. I'm just here to support. So
can we clip that and send to Sarah?
I think she's listening above. I'm in this little South City basement nook in my house, waiting for the rain to come through the walls.
Oh yeah.
No, just excited to be back in front of the microphone, coming to the game on Saturday and seeing everyone in person and seeing another city win.
Yeah,
you're
here. I had to miss. Yeah, you're here, and congrats again, man. I had to miss that last home game, and I can't wait to be back in that stadium again. It's gonna be so much fun. St. Louis brought it, and they keep bringing it. So anyway, that's all we got. Thank you all for listening. It's Flyover Footy. You can hear us on 550 KTRS. That's pretty cool still. It hasn't worn off, the good feeling there. So
they're still letting us do it. They're still putting us on. So
yeah, we haven't gotten fired yet.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, everyone. We'll talk to you next week.
See ya.